Hello there. I want to welcome you back. Welcome you all back from the conversations that you've been having. I hope you enjoyed your conversations with your peers. We're excited to sort of kick in to begin our next segment. I've got 5 wonderful panelists with me who are going to spend some time with, and we're going to hear from them about their personal experiences, their professional experiences around the summit theme of Together We Rise, United for California's Recovery and Reopening of Schools. So I am looking forward to basically being the timekeeper for an exciting conversation that we're going to have. I'm going to ask the panelists to each take a little bit of time to introduce themselves. You've seen who they are on the screens as we've been waiting for the panel to start. So when we kick off a question, I'll ask each of you to say a little bit more about who you are and how you came into this space, as well as answering the question. And we'll do this for a while. There'll be time for questions at the end, so put your questions in the chat, and we will hopefully have some time to ask the panelists questions toward the end of this. So let's start off first with Cielo and Zaid. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and then talk to us a little bit about how you have personally been dealing with things over the past 7 months and what you're doing to sort of meet those challenges. So Cielo, let's start with you to get introduced, then Zaid, introduce yourselves, and then let's just hear a little bit about how you've been dealing with things.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Cielo. I'm a senior at Fountain Valley High School in Orange County. And I also serve as a student board member for OC Human Relations. And so I wanted to thank you all for the opportunity to share my voice today. And I hope that I'm able to offer some valuable input, and I'm really excited to be able to learn together. Would Zaid like to introduce himself, or would you like me to respond to the question?
Introduce yourself, Zaid, and then we'll go back to the questions.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Zaid Fattah, and I'm a senior at Monte Vista High School in Danville, California. I'm also honored to be serving as the sole student member on the California State Board of Education this year. And then at the local level, I'm also involved in my district's LCAP committee, as well as my school site council.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you're getting the professional definitions of who they are in the chat as well. Zaid, why don't we just start with you? How has it been the past 7 months, and what's been going on, and how are you dealing with this?
Definitely. Well, I think for all of us, the past 7 months have especially been challenging. However, I think I've embraced the past 7 months as an opportunity for growth and an opportunity to really take initiative in my education. Obviously, there's been a lot of staying connected while staying apart. So communicating with friends via iMessage, FaceTime, or just Zooming with people, as well as going on socially distanced walks around my neighborhood. But I think that this has also presented me with a renewed opportunity to pursue like some of my passions. Namely, I'm really interested in like magic and calligraphy. And so I've had that opportunity to, I guess, go into those kinds of art forms as well. But I think one of the biggest takeaways that will serve me down the line when I go to college and just in the future that I've taken away is that learning is something that goes far beyond formal school. And this quarantine has really made me someone who is constantly searching for opportunities to learn both in and out of the classroom. And so I think that it's sparked almost this like intellectual vitality, a curiosity, I guess, to explore the world around me.
I think that's so important, and I'm so glad you started off with that. You know, when the pandemic first hit, we wrote an article called summer.learning.loss.leadership, because the whole country was thinking about, oh my goodness, academic learning loss, what's going to happen? And what you just said was so important. It was an opportunity for you to, yes, perhaps in some of those things you have to practice regularly, there was some slippage, but the chance to really explore interests, use the skills in different ways was so important. So I'm glad you kicked us off with that sort of asset-based answer to how things have been happening. Cielo, how about you? How have the past 7 months been, and how have you been facing these challenges?
Yeah, in response to your question, I wanted to be very honest that overall, it's been very difficult for me, especially emotionally and mentally. And For me, the seriousness of the pandemic kind of sunk in over the course of time. It was more gradual, and then there was a point where things got real for me. So initially, I was under the mistaken assumption that, the pandemic would be quick. It would be 2 months at most. And quite frankly, I was preoccupied with my SATs. And so for me, the watershed moment was twofold. And that's when school shut down and when we visited my grandparents with masks and we couldn't step into their apartment. And so now that I'm cut off from school, my teachers, staff, friends, and family, I kind of shut down as well. And so I isolated myself and I spent a lot of time in my room and I dove myself into work. And I felt hopeless and that there was no end in sight at the moment. And I missed my family and my friends and my teachers. But in retrospect, I haven't been getting through these challenges by myself. And I've learned that it still takes a village, especially in a pandemic. And my village helped me get better. So seeing my mom sewing, masks for our entire family and watching her immerse herself in woodwork, my brother challenging us to learn new skills, and my dad kind of giving us family health directives to help us keep safe. What really also helped me was my teacher who remained connected with us. And so now that we're back online, I'm starting to heal. And the pandemic reminded me that educators don't just educate my mind, they heal my heart and soul. And so there's no question that teachers miss students as much as students miss teachers. And personally, my world came down when you guys were taken out of my village. So I'm still dealing with these challenges, and now we're moving forward together and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and slowly taking steps towards one another. And I really believe that the only way to heal is together.
Wow, I thank you so much for that candid response. And I think between the two of you in a very short amount of time, we've heard the range of the complexity of what's happened over the 7 months. And again, just to go back to those words, the losses that we experienced were not just academic losses. And so taking each of those terms separately, they were huge opportunities to learn, huge opportunities to really understand and have to sort of adjust to the multiple losses, from relationships to just the feeling of isolation. All of that was incredibly important, and you all summed it up so well to get us started in looking at the range of things that we're all dealing with, and the range of things that we have to really be cognizant that young people are dealing with. And I'm especially excited that we started the panel off with 2 young people. I'm always excited when we start off any panel or anything with 2 young people. But too often in these conversations, and especially as we're talking about coming back to school, we're focusing on younger students because of the obvious childcare needs. And just because of the fact that you all are old enough to take care of yourselves doesn't mean that you need to or should, or that we should expect you to. So thank you so much for kicking us off in the right direction and sharing those things. Let's keep ourselves moving and go next to Chris and Johnielynn. And again, I'll get the 2 of you to introduce yourselves, and then we'll talk a little bit about the supports that you need to be able to really support young people and their families. So Christopher, why don't we start with you for introductions?
All right, I'm Chris Meza. I represent the Napa County Office of Education. I'm a site supervisor, site coordinator, and I'm also a site coordinator network member. So thank you for having me.
Wonderful. And Johnielynn?
Hi, my name's Johnielynn. I work at Pomo Elementary in Clear Lake, and I am a site assistant.
Wonderful. And Johnielynn, why don't we just start with you? What do you need to deal with this reality and to really support students or families in the way that you would like to?
I mean, there's just so much that we really need, but trainings and conferences to support from our districts, our biggest issue right now is space, and being able to have space for the children and ourselves to be able to socially distance and still give them the needs that they're able to, or give them the needs that they need.
And Chris?
Thank you. Johnielynn, I totally agree with you. Facilities are a big thing that we need, just an easy collaboration with school districts and county offices and programs. I'm with you on that one. As a state level, I feel like the California Department of Education has done an amazing job at giving us access to social emotional learning, mental health first aid, hard set. But I think just being able to give access to site coordinators to get that professional development, because we have hurting families, and I think at the core, we really need to address it with social and emotional learning, because I know it needs to work through us, and we need to be able to provide supports for families and really giving them some social emotional access as well. And I think one big acknowledgement right now is we all have to acknowledge and feel supported that we don't have the access to all the students that we are usually able to serve. We have an equity issue there. Some are able to pay fees, some are not able to pay fees. Some are not foster or homeless youth. So we also have a population that's at home right now. So just some support and brainstorming around that and how we could tackle that. At a programmatic level, I think we're at one of the most pivotal times that we need to collaborate with psychologists, counselors, social workers right now, because there's students that we need to really support right now. And I think we could do that with some great school site collaboration. I also think at a very practical level, as site coordinators right now, we have in-person childcare. And to support these students, we need all of these logins. And as you can imagine, to support the student academically, we need to have all of that information. So more than ever, a time to collaborate with teachers. So I think collaboration with all stakeholders will really support us in this time.
And Johnielynn, when you think about what Chris was talking about in these broad ways of collaboration, and you started off by just saying, you know, we need space. Are there examples of where at that very basic level, we're getting the bonuses of looking outside of the school into the community for space, but also finding the people that help us do the things that Chris said, not just provide space, but really strengthen relationships, et cetera. Can you have any examples of sort of where you're finding these that we can sort of kick off sort of into and everybody can join in, sort of what are we seeing and how are we thinking that this changes the way we work going forward?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, so we have in-person right now with it's a hybrid model. The kids are on virtual learning, but we have staff here supporting them and they're in the classrooms with us. So we only have 6 children right now, but we're trying to bring in a couple more. And one of our issues is that we're all so cramped in the room that when we have the staff to come, we're not able to all be in the room and help each other safely with social distancing and things. So we were talking about looking into the community and, you know, churches, parks, outside classrooms to be able to, you know, work outside more, get the kids out of being stuck inside all the time. So it's just a work in progress, like everything. We're all learning. It's all new to everybody, but that's been our biggest challenge so far, is just finding the right space and the right resources to reach out and find where to go for those spaces.
And what kind of information would be helpful? I mean, how can others help you get the information that you need to help your students and families?
Trainings would be amazing. Like he was talking about professional development, you know, not just for site leads, but as I'm a site assistant, you know, to have access to things, to be able to help the children, to have a little more access to go out into the community and talk to the community and see if we can get these spaces opened up. A lot more support from our admins and our district office on our issues that we're having would be amazing.
And if I could just add briefly, I think just simply acknowledging that after school and out of school time programs need to be thought about first when rolling out sanitation and site safety, because we serve a huge role for our kids and we spend as much time as they spend with their parents. So I feel like we need to be the #1 thought when we're looking at facilities and getting kids back to school.
And Chris, as you're thinking about all this, and Johnielynn weigh in as well, as you come at this from this perspective of where we are now and even where we'd like to go in the future, how are we making sure that we're making learning a joyous pursuit? How are we supporting the staff to really sort of lead with relationships, lead with enthusiasm? What does that look like? And then Cielo and Zaid, I'd love you to weigh in as well. And even think about what is it that high school students can do to be a part of this solution? Because I haven't heard much about that conversation. So let's open it up a little bit there. How do we make all this more joyous?
I think communicate. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead, Johnielynn.
So I think communication. We have Zoom meetings with the children that they're able to speak and talk. And I was just in one of the breakout rooms for trauma. And that's a big part is our children need to be, but not just them, the teachers, the staff, the parents, our poor parents, you know, they don't know where to go. We're lost. Imagine how they're feeling when in the beginning, when this all started, I was a stay-at-home mom when schools got closed and things with my two children, and I was lost. We didn't have the resources to get, you know, Chromebooks and places, things like that. So I think reaching out and talking to the students and making sure that they know we're still here for them, and just because they don't get to see us in person, they can reach out. They can email us, we can Zoom, we can, you know, the Google Hangouts, we've been doing that a lot.
Good. Chris, jump in.
Yeah, so I think it starts with youth leadership and voice, our quality standard. We need to ask the kids, what are things that you enjoy? You know, with some of the Zoom things that we have to really focus on, what are some fun ways that we could implement with technology? Maybe, you know, getting some training on more technology. And I've been lucky to be a part of a network that's been able to give us those trainings. But I think it really starts with youth leadership and voice. And I think we all as after school professionals, we all have passions. And I think now is the time to really dive back into things that might not have worked in the past and really just try to innovate with our passions and using our passions. Quick story, we had a summer program launched in the summer and it was all technology, all Zoom. And at a level where like, what is gonna happen? Is this gonna be okay? And it ended up being amazing because we all walked in with our passion. We had a science club, all Zoom. We had a sports club, all Zoom. Kids in their backyard bouncing basketballs. And that was all based on the feedback that we received from the youth. So the youth know what they want to do. We just need to ask and have a plan for that.
Well, I think we have no choice but to turn to the youth who are with us. And ask you, what do you want us to know, including how do you want to be involved in this build back process? Zaid, let's start with you.
Well, I think kind of to touch on those two questions, the first one being the how to make learning a little bit more joyous. I think that from what I've seen, at least in my school and just like in my economics class specifically, we haven't been, you know, going to class and opening a textbook or like spending the period reading and just being lectured at. It's been a lot of discussion-based learning. And I think that when we talk about things that are kind of presently going on in the world from the lens of economics, I think it really brings learning to life. And it makes me really interested in the things that I'm learning because I think that I see their applicability and just how topical they are to the real world. And that doesn't just stop with economics. That you know, that applies to both like biology. In my calculus class, we do things like that. So I think that kind of just looking for ways in which we can connect the dots between what we're learning in school to what's kind of going on in our real world is one of the ways to get students more interested in the things that are kind of going on right now. And I think that we all need to like obviously be cognizant that there are going to be some hiccups along the way. Nothing's going to be perfect. But I think that it's kind of that acknowledgement that nothing is going to be perfect that makes us human. And so I think that that will make learning a little bit more joyous. Sorry, what was the second question?
Oh, second, just building on that, since we're talking about youth voice, but I want to sort of broaden it out to youth leadership. In addition to making sure your opinions about how to make learning more joyous are understood, are there ways that you think high school students could actually be contributing in this space. We're short on staff, we're short on connections. Do you have thoughts there?
Oh, of course. So at least in my school district, and what I've noticed, and also at the state level, California has this law, AB 261, which states that students can serve as trustees on their district boards of education. And the thing that I've noticed, just been from doing some scavenging and things like that, is that not every single school district across California has a student member who sits amongst their board of trustees. I know at least my school district doesn't yet, actually, because I've been petitioning for it since January, and we're kind of in the process of getting it. But I think that really involving students in positions such as the student board member position on their district board of education, but also there are other committees that students can get involved with that are especially important, such as the Local Control and Accountability Plan Committee, LCAP, their school site council. And you don't have to be elected to really any position of leadership to be civically involved. I think that really just trying to find ways to kind of inject your voice into the conversation. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're, the ASB president, or if you just go to school because you want to learn. Everybody has a voice in their education system. And I think that we're always welcome to anybody's perspective, because at the end of the day, people's perspective are the only thing that can shape us to be better. And so hearing from what anybody has to say is something that is incredibly welcomed. And yeah.
Wonderful. Cielo, let's get you jump in here.
Yeah, I think maybe, I know that Zaid touched a lot on getting involved in committees and speaking up in your school, in your classroom. But I think something I'd like to ask teachers or encourage teachers is to help find opportunities for students to explore our passions more in the classroom. And so personally, my English teacher a couple of years ago assigned us a social justice project that we could choose any topic that we were passionate about. And I chose to do my research on ethnic studies. And because she challenged me, I'm now part of a district committee that is developing an ethnic studies course to be available at our district by next fall. And so it was that teacher support and those opportunities that I had in my classroom that really facilitated the opportunity for me to get involved and to get involved at the district level.
Great. So, we've been talking about how we sort of bring joy into the connections that we're making with young people. Christopher, the great work that we're able to pivot to virtually and demonstrate the innovation that can happen. But we know that there are many young people who are struggling, and that's especially low-income young people of color are really struggling, and it's hitting some communities really hard. So what is it that we need to be doing to be more cognizant and even more forceful around equity and social justice? How do we use this moment to really not let young people slip away unnoticed, but actually broaden the circle and bring them back in? What advice do you all have? And we'll start with Chris and Johnielynn, but I'd love to hear all of you really speak to this.
Yeah, I think, going back into, we need to grab a team at our site levels, our principals, our counselors, and we really need to come together and identify those kids that are struggling, the kids that aren't showing up on the Zoom calls. And we need to find ways that we could get our program information to them, even if it's having a parent community liaison helping fill out the application. We really need to do everything that we can to know that we could get these kids into our program. And I think, again, the big word today is collaboration. We have to collaborate. We have to be seen as team members. We have to be seen as people that could sit at the table. And when we do that at a site and with a great out of school time program, I think that's when we really start seeing progress for those kids that slip away.
Jump in, Johnielynn.
Yeah, so I totally agree, Chris. I mean, to get them back on, and like Zaid and Cilio, I think is how you say her name, they were saying, you know, to have them as part of that team that Chris was talking about would be beneficial to help reach out and engage those students that might not want to interact with teachers or staff. Maybe they would feel more comfortable to reach out to a kid if we had like a, you know, a student-led Zoom meeting and something that they had picked that they like to do.
And I mean, I'll just ask you to all just take yourself off mic so we don't have to go on and off for the sort of round robin conversation as we get to the end of this. But do you have, either personally or through your programs, do you have examples of young people that initially weren't reached that you've been able to be successful reaching? Zaid and Cielo, do you know of young people who have not responded as well as you have in the pandemic, and what would help them?
So am I off mic? Yeah. So we actually have tracked children down. We live in a small community and we've been able to do that and reach out to them that way. Or like Chris was saying, you know, collaborating together and being able, between all of the staff, we're lucky that we live in such a small community. We've been able to track kids down and reach out and have staff that's closer or, you know, has a connection with that child to reach out to them and get them going. We email multiple. We have enrichments that we do that each person has picked and done something. I run a horse enrichment, so they're learning about different horses and things like that. So we send them invitations out to invite them to join us and just to get them engaged, you know, just to have them check in, check out, make sure that they're okay, that they're not struggling with homework. We make phone calls and things like that to try to reach out as much as humanly possible. I've seen a big change in how many students are active and engaging than at the end of the year last year.
Chris, you want to hop in with an example?
Yeah, really sad example, but a great ending. So we have an AmeriCorps member who supported, an AmeriCorps member is a federal funded member that helps in our expanded learning program. They were on a call with a girl, and the girl was telling her what her schedule was like now in the pandemic. She's dropped off at 4 o'clock in the morning to a babysitter, has to go back to sleep, and then she has to then get on to distance learning at 8 o'clock in the morning at her babysitter's house. And then we're thinking about, if we're trying to address basic needs with a mother who's trying everything that she can to be financially stable in this economy, how can we support? And this adult that all of our kids need went to the school counselor, went to the principal and said, hey, we need to figure something out for this child. And we were able to at least get the counselor to speak, and we had a community liaison reach out to the mother to support in finding the best case scenario for this student. And I'm hoping that we could get that student into our expanded learning, or has been entered into our expanded learning. But those are the type of stories that we have right now. And I think it, more than ever, everyone that's on the Zoom call that's in an after school position, we have to be that adult that goes the extra mile for those kids.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, Johnielynn, back to the story that you just shared, as you all decided, we're going to go out and find the young people who are not connecting. Did you meet resistance when you went out to find them? And what were some of the reasons for the disconnection?
We started with homeless children. So that was a big part of it, of tracking them down, was they don't have a place to be found. And yeah, there's resistance, the parents don't want them here because they're worried that other agencies will come in, or they're just not able to make it here. I mean, we've tried to reach out and help as much as humanly possible that, we're able to, within our grasp, help them. But sometimes, we have 2 students that we reached out, we got them here, we provided, we offered, and they still just have not been able to make it back, unfortunately. I'm just, yeah, it's sad. It's so hard. We want to help them all and reach out to them all. But we have one boy that is in our program, and we see a little bit of trauma there, you know, that whether it's from the pandemic or it's from something is going on. And since he's been here, I've seen him open up a little bit more and get a little more closer to staff. And, you know, he went from being angry and stuff to where when we talk to him now, he's like, okay, you know. So that's a good part of it, to see some changes.
And Cielo and Zaid, stories that you have from either programs you work in or young people that you know of, how do we make this sort of inequity clearer to people at this time?
Yeah, I think if I could just add, I think if anything, what we've learned is that educating as an act of love before, during, and after school is more necessary than ever. And so when we hear about kids having to do their homework outside of Taco Bell because they don't have internet, you know, that's not acceptable. And we have to invest in community spaces and after school programs that provide the educational tools so that all students can continue to learn. And if we don't do that, we're denying kids their full education. And so even in my district in Huntington Beach, where the stereotype is that, you know, we're well-to-do, it took us nearly a month to go back online because, you know, even Orange County had equity issues. But ultimately, I think what the pandemic has taught us is that we need to expand the school day and expand the school campus as well.
Wonderful advice. Zaid.
I think this is kind of one specific story from just one of my experiences, I guess, in this pandemic. So I've been kind of like a volunteer / intern for IRC in Oakland. That's International Rescue Committee. And so through that, I've had the opportunity to work with refugee youth in the Alameda and Contra Costa County since my sophomore year. And actually this past kind of like towards the end of last school year and then into the summer, I was working with one specific student. And I think that for me, what was hard was seeing how he kind of he went under the rug because he was an ESL learner, and how he, I guess, like it's not as though like his school district like purposefully denied him like any ESL training, but I think that he kind of went under the rug because he had just come from Afghanistan and he had just arrived in the United States. His family didn't know how to communicate with a lot of like the school officials. And so I think that really, I guess, finding like a way to reach out to those specific students, the ones who kind of just arrived here, especially during the pandemic, and haven't really had an opportunity to assimilate. I know that especially for ESL learners, for students who oftentimes unfortunately go swept under the rug, I think it's especially important that we do a lot of like reaching out to those students. And just that doesn't have to be something that, you know, adults have to do necessarily. I think that students can really initiate things like that. You can get involved with organizations like IRC. You can start these kinds of programs. You can reach out to your district and see like, oh, how can I help like underserved communities, so that we together as like a group all advance and we all get better, I think. So yeah.
Wonderful. So Chris and Johnielynn, as we think about the role that expanded learning programs can play at this time, but also the role that they can play in demonstrating the amount of both commitment and flexibility that you have to be more responsive. What is it that you want us to know to really take full advantage of the opportunities and the potential that you have to address the kind of issues that you just raised? What should we be taking away from this? Chris, you're nodding. I'll let you start.
I'm a processor. You know, I just think expanded learning, our flexibility, like you said, Karen, we are able to be the ones that design what we see for our programs. I'm going to leak a little bit into what we're going to talk about in just a second. But part of that flexibility is creating a program that every person feels included in is the number one place that we need to start. And that's by creating things that they're interested in, identifying them with everything that they would like to be identified as. And I think we just need to be a program that includes everyone. And I think that's the flexibility that we have for our programs. And there's many ways that we could do that. But I'll let Johnielynn jump in on that one.
One thing too that Zaid talked on, we're able to reach a lot more kids right now with the expanded learning. I mean, we're able to reach out and get to these children that we may not normally have had access to, or they weren't in, the after school program and offered these opportunities. If we could reach out and offer to not just our enrolled after school kids, but, to our enrichments and our Zoom conferences, and to, they were saying, to have the kids help kids. I think that was such a great idea. I absolutely love that, to, set up tutoring sessions, or, even just a group chat and talk about what's going on and how things are going. That's one thing that's really, been a blessing to this, is we are able to kind of put more things like that into effect, because we're all through Zoom calls, and we can reach out and bring different groups of people together, as where if we were still in regular classrooms and stuff, we couldn't, we'd stay in our own little rooms. So the flexibility there is just opened so many amazing opportunities, I think, that we could really grow off of.
Well said.
Wonderful. So Cielo and Zaid, as we're getting close to the end of our time, I want to open it up and see if you all have any questions up for each other. As you listened in this conversation, are things that came to mind that you want to make sure you share, or you follow up on while you've got all these wonderful people here? So I'll ask it both ways. This is your chance to ask a couple questions of each other, and then I'll get a final word from each of you before we wrap up.
So I'll ask.
Okay.
To our students, what's a good way for us to involve you guys in helping reach out to other children?
I think from my experience, when a teacher just reaches out to me kind of individually and says, I guess like makes it like a one-on-one interaction and says like, hey, this is kind of the person that we would like to reach out to, and we know that you're friends with that person. I think if it comes from a teacher also, it's a little bit more, I guess like less like scary almost than if it were to come from an administrator. And I think at the end of the day, like I'm a lot more closer, I think, with my teachers than with some of my administrators. So I think just really like taking the time to reach out. I think students, especially during this pandemic, have realized that teachers really, they don't bite. And we're all kind of one community together. And so I think that if you, I guess, just send us an email or just send us some kind of like message, would be happy. At least that's what I've noticed from not just me, but like a lot of other students in my school who might have had friends who weren't, fully participating on Zoom. Their teachers reached out to them and said, hey, like, could you talk to the student and see, I guess, like what's going on? And I think that made all the difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that students would really value more opportunities to collaborate with teachers as equals, and to really not just, be in the classroom where we're learning from teachers, but really where we have a space where we can learn from each other, and where students can bring their contributions and their solutions to the table as well.
Wonderful. Well, I see that Tony has joined us. Great to have you join in the conversation. I know you've been listening in the whole time. Share some words of wisdom with us.
Well, thank you, Karen, and thank you to all the presenters. The only words of wisdom that I have is we should be hiring Cielo and Zaid right now. And if you all don't, I will. And I'd like to hire you all, and I'd like to vote for you someday on whatever it is that you plan to do. I'm in your corner. I got your back. You know, I think that you all have just been really spit knowledge for us. You know, it's been really great to listen to your sophisticated ideas about how we should be supporting students. I couldn't be more proud to be your state superintendent. And you all were the teachers just now, and it was just great to listen in. And so if you have other thoughts about anything that we should be doing as a system of educators trying to support students during this pandemic, please share that now or later or both, because this is harder than anything I think any of us have ever seen before. And I really appreciated what you all had to say. Christopher and Johnielynn, I just really love what you said. You know, a million years ago when I first started working in schools, it wasn't after school programs. And when you talked about space, it brought back good memories and some bad, you know, like when we come to a new school and they say, we're going to put the whole team of 7 or 8 after school specialists and tutoring specialists in the closet or in the bathroom. I mean, it brought back tears to my eyes about space challenges. And so I guess what I'd like to say to you and to everyone who's participating today, just a simple thank you. You know, you do a lot in ways that people don't always understand, where you don't always get appreciation. You know, expanded learning is learning for our students. And, you know, after school time, before school time is important learning time for our students. And I want to thank you for what you all are doing. And for everyone who's participating in today's Zoom. You know, sometimes we just forget to say our thanks, and to be doing all this during a pandemic really is more than a notion, and it deserves thanks. To do this on top of fires and schools burning down, you know, air quality, you know, all kinds of things that we know we're seeing, it deserves to be acknowledged that this is probably the toughest time and challenge that most of us will experience in our lifetime. And to do this when we see acts of police brutality and racism and bias of all kinds playing out before our very eyes every single day, we just have to acknowledge we're dealing with the pandemic, and we're dealing with the human pandemic of racism and hate. And we have to send the message that it will not be tolerated, that we will not be divided, that we will come together as people across groups to support each other. Because that's the only way we will ever get through these tough times. I just want to say thank you to all the educators who are on the Zoom. And for all that you all are doing for California kids. It is true, it's the toughest time. You know, I listened, and if there are things that we can do to support you in getting more personal protective equipment, please let us know. I want to thank the staff at the California Department of Education, Michael Funk and Sarah Neville Morgan. They continue to preach about the importance and the value of after-school programs and expanded learning. They continue to remind me that our expanded learning staff come from our communities. They reflect the diversity of our students, that they are, to me, I think we should, you know, I've talked about it. We got to create another pipeline program to, you know, when we talk about recruiting teachers, we should be recruiting from the ranks of our expanded learning staff. I heard you, Johnielynn, when you talked about professional development. I know you did too, Christopher. I'm sitting over here taking notes. I was like, wow, I'm getting schooled here. Karen, you know, thank you for letting me just like listen in, because, you know, I didn't want to come in at the end of the Zoom and try to like be like, greetings, y'all, I'm out. It really was helpful to be able to hear the context of the things that you all are asking for, and everything that you're asking for, you deserve. You know, as a system, we need to do a better job of providing more funding for expanded learning programs. That means everything from better compensation for our staff who support our students. That means better training, better resources and facilities. You know, it was tough under traditional times. I can't imagine how you manage space when we're trying to socially distance everyone. And so if you got thoughts about what we can do together, let us know, you know, because we have access to the California School Boards Association and the Association of Administrators. They're struggling too, right? Everyone's struggling, but we've got to struggle together. And that's really my belief and my philosophy. It's why we've named a new mini grant program where we're moving $200,000 right now to schools to have grants for education to counter hate, to address racism, to address bias and bullying. We know that many of our students have been bullied. Our LGBTQ students have been bullied. Our Asian American students have been bullied by a president who's conflating coronavirus with something that they're responsible for, which is just so out of context, out of line, and just not true. We need to support our Native American students, many of whom who've been hearing things taught about their history that's just not accurate. Cielo, thank you for promoting ethnic studies. You know, we've launched an ethnic studies mini-series, because even though the state doesn't have a graduation requirement for ethnic studies, you know, we're a little bitter about that. We want to make sure that young people get to learn about ethnic studies. Our students have told us that they want to see representation of themselves. We're creating a youth advisory council, brand new. Zaid, thank you for rocking the bill that we worked on to make sure that every school district will have a student board member who votes. You're right, it's not there yet. So we're building this youth advisory council. In the very first meeting, get this, we thought we were offering support to the students. We were saying, hey, y'all, we know this is a traumatic time. They came back and they gave us knowledge. They said we needed to do a better job of letting them have the chance to learn about their own history. They said, how come we never learn about the history of people of color in this state and the accomplishments that they've made? And so because of that, Cielo, is why we started this ethnic studies roundtable, where we were educating students for the first time about ethnic studies. It was so well received that we've decided to do another one. And I hope that you'll come on, you know, and be a guest speaker. We had some folks like Dolores Huerta as a special guest. We had Karen Koromatsu, who is the daughter of the late, great Fred Koromatsu, civil rights icon, who sued the US government over his false detainment during the Japanese internment camps period. And so we had the Assembly member, Dr. Weber, who's been teaching Africana studies for 40 years. We've had incredible leaders, talking about Chicano Latino studies. Anyway, I hope that you'll come on and join us. Zaid's my board member, so I get to see him, in the board meetings, and he's speaking out publicly across the state. I'm just gushing right now because I'm so proud of our students, and y'all got me all pumped up and inspired. I'm sorry, Karen, I'm sure I'm way off message, but just Tiffany's over there laughing at me because, she knows I'm off message, but it's all about these students. And I'm gonna be quiet now and just see if you all have some homework assignments for me that you would like for us at the California Department of Education to work on with all of our educators across the state. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for your facilitation, Karen. Always glad to see you, Tiffany. All of you continue to be safe and well. And I am just such a fan and proud of everything that the expanded learning community is doing. Michael Funk's been on me. He's like, Tony, we gotta get them some more money, some more money, some more money. Yes, Michael, you're right. I'm in. Let's do that work together and try to figure it out as we move forward. So with that said, I'm just going to be quiet and listen to see if you all have some homework assignments for me.
Well, I'm sure they do, but if you were off message, I don't know what the message was you thought you were brought on to give, because every single thing you said, believe me, I do this a lot. And if I could get that message with that enthusiasm happening in other places around the country, we would be in much better shape. So thank you. For coming on and just sort of reaffirming the value of these kind of conversations, and reaffirming the value of expanded learning, and reaffirming the value of moving forward together. It's that together word, together we will rise, that we really have to emphasize what it means by together, and that together doesn't just mean as important as showing up on screen. It really does mean taking the time to understand deeply the assets that each and every one of us brings into this conversation and brings into this work, so that we can leverage them. So at the forum, we have something that we're calling the readiness projects, which are really just a series of things that we're tapping into people around the country to say, what does it take not just to help our young people be ready, but to actually make sure that our adults are ready, that our settings are ready, that our communities and schools are ready. Readiness isn't, we can't somehow expect young people to be ready if we aren't asking those very difficult questions that you're asking, and you put a lot of the answers there. I'm gonna just turn to each of our panelists very quickly and give you a phrase. And the phrase that we're using over the next couple months is, how do we make the invisible visible? We know that with the virus, And with the unrest, so many things that have always been there that are not because of the virus are now more visible. But what do we do to not just have them be seen as sort of temporary things, but acknowledge the history that put them there and make sure that as we move forward, we don't let them slip back into visibility. So if each of you had to think about something that you want to make sure, since you've got Superintendent Thurmond on the screen looking at you, that as we're moving forward, we want to make sure this idea, this concern is front and center. What would it be? Zaid, I'll start with you. What do you want to make sure? He says he's your boss. What do you want to make sure he knows going forward? What should we not let be invisible in this time?
Zaid is my boss, just so that in case I didn't make it clear, I work for Zaid and Cielo and the 6 million students in this state.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Thurmond, for coming on. I think you are obviously very aware of AB 261 because you wrote it. So I think that kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, I think that student involvement and student voice in decision-making processes, whether they be on LCAP or on district boards of education, especially right now, are so integral because students are truly the conduits to leaders are truly the conduits to the student populations at school sites. And so I think it's especially important that we get students involved in every single decision-making process in the education system, especially at the local level, because that's the best way in which we can ensure that really the decisions that are being made are ones that will positively affect students and ones that students are truly on board with. So that's kind of my biggest concern.
Thank you. And, let's find a way to work together on the implementation of AB 261. A lot of school districts, when you ask them if they have a voting school board member, they say no. And this is the law. And beyond the law, it's a really great thing to do because when we get the benefit of having great voices like the ones that you and Cielo are providing. So happy to work with you on that.
Okay. Cielo, you want to go next?
Sure. I think one of the issues that the pandemic has truly exposed is just the ongoing racism and systemic racism in our country and in all of our country's systems. And so I love our country, but I do believe that in order to form a more perfect union, we have to uproot systemic racism. And so the challenge before us is both a privilege and a responsibility. And so when we come out of this pandemic, I hope that we can keep these issues and bring forth solutions that really attack the root of the problem, not just in the time that we're in, but going forward. And I think at the end of the day, I look at humans, we're all ripples of hope, like RFK said. And I think together our small contributions can really sweep down racism and injustices and really bring us hope for forging a better society for all of us, and specific to education, making sure that school is the best place it can be for all students.
Wonderful.
Wow.
Chris.
A lot of people were saying they wanted to vote for you in the chat. You can put me down in that category. Politics has broken down the lack of civility, and our elected leaders are joining the chorus of those who are tearing us apart. And at a time when people are crying out for racial justice, Cielo, your message is so powerful. Thank you for lifting your voice. If you have any interest in what we're doing, as I mentioned, we literally took a grant that was for one thing and said, we're sending it to as many schools as we can get it so that they can start working on training around racial justice issues, anti-racism and anti-bias, anti-Semitism, homophobia, Islamophobia, dealing with all the different types of bias that exists in schools. Would love to get your insights. There are at least 2 of my staff in the Zoom, in the panelists. They can make sure that we connect back with you. I see Daniel is there. I see James is there. Again, what you said was beautiful. It is so the message that we need. Thank you for providing that voice, and we'd love to have your insights and help going forward.
Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Thurmond, for being here. It's a big deal. You know, in the out of school time programs, we face all the time just turnover of staff because professionals in the after school world just aren't seeing a long career because of the way that they're paid. And just kind of want to hear your thoughts on what future programs could we create that would give them a foot in the door to a credential program, or what are some ways that we could be competitive and really keep these great people that really are some of those youth that grew up that had an equity issue and aren't able to get into colleges. So I would really love your leadership and any thought that you have with Michael Funk. What's something we could do about this turnover that of great professionals that have great capacity, but they have to move into another career?
Yeah, great question. You know, there some years ago, there was a bill that made it easier for folks who worked in schools in classified positions to become on a training program to become teachers. And the bill was wildly successful. All of the funding got used up almost immediately. You know, I think we need to look to that model as an example for how we build a similar pipeline for our educators who are already working in schools and after schools, who are working in expanded learning, to give them opportunities to you know, move into the teacher profession, but to move into other professions. Both you and Johnielynn both talked about professional development. And I think if we do a better job with that professional development, hopefully we'll land some more teachers. We have a teacher shortage and we need teachers. Hopefully we'll land teachers, but we'll also use that professional development to create other opportunities for our expanded learning workforce. And there's no question we have to do a better job with training, compensation, the whole package. And we'd love to have insights from you all about how we might shape that. So let's stay in touch. Michael knows how to reach me. I've been knowing Michael Funk for 20 plus years. Karen, Michael reminded me that we all came together around the America's Promise, you know, programs with all this focus around after school programs. Michael had me out at the Sunset Neighborhood Beacon Center many times. Matter of fact, that's where we kicked off the San Francisco Promise contingent. And so all that to say, connected, Christopher, so that we hear your, you know, the worst thing to do is create a policy that's not informed by the people who have the expertise. And so I would love it that if we are able to do something to create a pipeline for folks in expanded learning to either get into the teaching profession, that it is informed by those like yourself and others who have direct experience. And so let's keep the conversation going.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Amazing. Johnielynn.
Wow, what a group to follow up. You guys are absolutely amazing. So one of the things that I've noticed is, so we have the kids that are on distance learning that, you know, we can see that they're attending or if they're engaged or they're not engaged. But what about kids that are falling through the cracks? The kids that are there, but they're not engaging. They're not, you know, that's being put on just our teachers when they're already so overwhelmed with learning how to teach all over again. So just to figure out a way to make sure that we're able to support the teachers and them and the kids to keep them from falling through the cracks, the ones that, you know, aren't our A+ students but are showing up, just not getting the proper help.
Thank you for that question, Johnielynn. You know, we've been trying to do some thinking on this, and we can certainly use your help and others. You know, one of the things I created what I call it a counseling coalition, because I was concerned in the first wave of distance learning for the number of students who didn't even check in at all. And then, as you point out, many students have checked in, but everyone in the pandemic, students, adults, everyone is experiencing the impacts of coronavirus, meaning the depression that comes with it, the difficulties of not being able to make social connection. You know, it's just so difficult. And we're looking for ways to sort of create sort of patchwork areas of support, lanes of support to support students. What we're trying to do is establish a call-in number where you can call anywhere, you can call from anywhere in the state, a toll-free number, and you just say, look, I need some support, and you can get support in your area. We're working with groups like the California School Counselors Association, School Psychologists Association, School Social Workers. I'm a social worker. I got to rock the social workers. You know, we those who have masters in family therapy. We're trying to build support, and we're trying to build our social emotional learning programs so that knowledge is important, and what students learn, the content knowledge is important. But right now, we need to build on students' social emotional learning right now. We need to make sure, and I appreciate a lot of schools, they're starting with kind of a homeroom period as a way of sort of checking in with students to see how they're doing and trying to make connections. But I think we need to do more. I just think that right now, social emotional supports are one of the most important things that we can do. A lot of schools may not know this, but every single school district has been given money to focus on things like social emotional learning, counseling, and supports. The governor and the legislature has provided $5.2 billion to support anything related to distance learning. That's for computers, that's for professional development, and that's for social emotional learning. And we need to make sure that schools really draw down on those funds and put those programs in place. I know that a lot of our expanded learning programs, that's what they focus on: social connection, social emotional learning, caring adults who are doing great work with our students in structured activities. And so, we'd be happy to work with you on that, with our counseling coalition, and to make sure that our schools are using their dollars to expand the social emotional learning and supports.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I know our panel is running a little bit over. I need to run off to my next virtual meeting. It's one way to move around the country is to never leave your chair. I was with you in California this morning, then I went to Pittsburgh, and now I'm about to go to Cleveland. But before I leave for Cleveland, I really just want to say thank you so much to the panelists for sharing your stories and for sharing your wisdom and your ideas. Superintendent Thurmond, thank you so much for joining to listen. It is so important to be heard. And then I would throw one thing in before I leave in this wonderful conversation about how do we support the adults. If we really are going to own up to the best of what expanded learning can be, we need to recognize that the end path for helping really have adults who are prepared to fully fill the space of not just where learning happens, when learning happens, but really expand our understanding of how learning happens and why young people are motivated to learn and who they want to learn from. We need to be really careful not to assume that the end goal for investing in adults who work with young people in expanded learning is to be a classroom teacher, because we have so many adults in the building and outside the building who are from the community, who have real life experiences and professional experiences in other areas, who can enrich our young people's lives. That as we're really looking to sort of move forward together and rise together, that together shouldn't be narrowed into something that overprivileges academics. Critically important, but when we want our young people to be thriving, it is socially, it is emotionally, it is civically, it is physically, and all that has to be hooked together. And they have to have a sense of agency and identity that they only get if they really are truly enmeshed in their communities with people from their communities. So I want to leave you with that message, which does not in any way undermine the idea that we clearly need more qualified teachers. But we do need adults, and we need to understand, as you all were talking about earlier, the real value of these expanded learning settings and how we really activate them. So I'm sorry I wasn't with you the whole day. I'm glad I was able to be a little bit of a bookend. And Tiffany, I'm turning it over to you.
Karen, as always, thank you for your wisdom, for your heart, for your commitment to this field. And we know you have to go, but thank you so much. And to everybody else, y'all don't turn any cameras off. We had a whole plan of what we were going to say and do. All that's out the window completely, because this has been so worth the time, right? The fact that the superintendent's initial comments, right, that he just acknowledged these young people in a way that the rest of the room went crazy, right? That's what kind of started things, right? And then just like a couple of points, right? We said things like learning happens everywhere. We said things like when Cielo had her watershed moment. How often do you have a high school student say that I had a watershed moment? And then she spoke about her own development and what she had to kind of deal with from a social emotional perspective. The fact that they both acknowledged that the way that learning had traditionally happened had stopped for them, and then what they had to do to move that forward. The fact that both Chris and Johnielynn, how your work has shifted and it continues to shift, right? Like we are trying to really get all of our field to understand that we are in an evolutionary process when it comes to education. And for the first time, expanded learning, we're not at a deficit in the conversation because we're so clear in this moment that connecting with kids and families is the most important thing that we can do first. Someone put in the chat the whole Maslow's before Bloom's. And basically what that means is that we need to take care of each other as humans, because in that human space, learning is more likely to happen, right? And so we're all really clear about what that's starting to look like for us as a field, as a group. I think we're at this moment where, and I won't get too much on this soapbox, but the equity conversation is past due. And our children have been suffering in these communities for decades. And that now that we have a moment where literally the world stood still because of a pandemic and was able to see the things that they no longer had, they couldn't hide from. George Floyd's murder was a tipping point. It created space for us to have conversations in a way that now started to center on every child every day. And that's the work that we've been about, right? And the way that the expanded learning community stepped up to meet that need. We came into spaces and they didn't have to be in schools. We were in communities, right? We said, okay, we don't do childcare, we can do it right now. We said, we don't do lunches, we can pass them out right now. We said, they don't have computers, we'll make sure that that happens as well, right? So I think the fact that this conversation here today exemplifies what our field is all about, right? And so I just wanted to, for me, I was supposed to do a lot of reflecting on a whole bunch of other stuff. I got completely off task. So thank you, Tony, for allowing that to happen, because I think your passion and as a leader, creating space and opportunity for people to actually think about education differently. And for all of these amazing people, there's 500 or so people that have been on this call off and on all day, and how they look at the work that they do as being meaningful and important. And the fact that we know we change kids' lives every day. There's a really good project thinking about how we're talking about also connecting the dots, that there's programs like in Oxnard where they are trying to elevate if expanded learning professionals want to go into the teaching field. There's programs like the African American Male Achievement work that Chris did in Oakland, and how they identified that the strongest teachers were the ones that had 4 or 5 years of youth development experience under their belt. So understanding that the work that we do, it creates better learning spaces for kids. It allows us to like connect the way that we would love to. I think it was funny when Karen said, you know, how do we make the invisible visible? You create space for them at the table so they can speak for themselves. One of the biggest things that our system has always done, and if you look at a school, the majority of people on a campus are students, and they have the least amount of voice and power in spaces. How have we created a structure that says youth voice and leadership? For us, it's a standard. It's the one that I believe if you embody it, it can change a program or a system in a heartbeat, because children call what they want and what they need. And the adults have to speak up to that. We have to rise to that occasion versus making children change children behavior, right? So the fact that we're in this space, that we are at this moment and this opportunity, and we are looking at it as an opportunity, how do we elevate together? How do we kind of come together to meet this opportunity head on? And we do that with the people like you that are on this panel. So from CAN and the rest of the CDE team, y'all, sincerely and thank you. Superintendent Michael, why don't you all come off the mic and you all get to say whatever you'd like to say to end this amazing day for us.
Superintendent, what are your, give us some remarks that at this moment before I close this up.
You know, Michael and Tiffany, someone who I respect greatly, once said that when people have said great things, all you have to say is, I want to associate myself with the remarks of my distinguished colleagues. There's no need for me to say anymore. I want to associate myself with the remarks of this distinguished panel, facilitator, and the work of Tiffany and Ken. So Michael, perhaps you have a word.
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent. And the panel, you've amplified and punctuated everything we've been trying to say over the last 7 months, and done it with such passion and grace. Zaid, Cielo, Johnielynn, Christopher, your leadership and words have been inspiring, as everyone has said. When we thought about discussing who was going to wrap up the panel and give some comments, I suggested Tiffany. I think we made a good choice, sister. You know, Tony, in January, I was speaking with a group of 75 expanded learning leaders from across the state that make up our system of support for expanded learning. We didn't know what was coming, but I said, if I understand equity to be gathering all the voices together, all the voices that, and in a place where they belong, and create something new that really changes the experience for young people. I said, if there's one place we can do that now, it's expanded learning. We have the flexibility, we can create a new reality for the children that are not making it through the system. We can address the systemic racism that is holding things down. We need to examine ourselves first when we think about systemic racism. What policies do we have in place? What rules do we have in place that are somehow preventing our staff and our kids to become all they can, to truly belong? What do we have in place that is preventing every child in California from getting what they deserve, which is our best? And that group of people said, let's do it. And then the pandemic hit. And what I've seen in the last 6 or 7 months are acts of heroic care and inclusion and creation of a reality that we've never seen before. We're now seeing expanded learning staff working alongside of school day educators, which just talked about each other before, and now they're working together. Cielo, you said something very powerful, which was education is an act of love. And you don't know this, but for the last couple of years, my mantra, I say every time I speak, is lead with love. That is our first charge. And I've seen it in the chat today. And I believe that, Superintendent, with your leadership and your vision, your background, your values, your passion, your history, that we have a moment in expanded learning to create a reality for kids that we've never had the chance to create before. That the disruption in the K-12 system right now is giving us a moment to redefine ourselves and to redesign something within the K-12 system that is shaped by the voices of our young people. It's shaped by the voices of our line staff, which are from the communities. And I just have one question for everybody. Are you ready? It's the time. We have traditionally sat on the side and said, okay, school leaders, educators, what do you need us to do? It's the time for us to be an equal partner in the design and the conversation, to show up fully with our strengths, which are the people I'm seeing on this screen. It's time. And if we, and we're going to come out of this pandemic with a new reality if we act on it now. So that's my challenge. Superintendent, you've invited us today to join you in that design and that creation. We've got a workforce strategy implementation committee that is starting its work next week. They've recruited from around the state, and one of the things that they're working on is how do we better support the workforce in expanded learning? How do we address issues of inequity with the workforce of expanded learning? And how do we make sure there's a career pathway into the larger educational system? And your governmental affairs folks have been reaching out to us this week about a bill on the teacher pipeline and expanded learning to put together some ideas for you for consideration. So folks, this is moving, and it's now time for us. And the leadership here has to be collective. You know, it can't just be the superintendent. It can't be me as a division director. My deputy superintendent, Sarah Novell Morgan, who is so passionate about your work and what we're doing. So we're going to use this as the point. We're going to recognize that so many of you have risen in so many ways over the last several months of this pandemic. Together we rise to this new horizon for young people, for our staff, and for our state. With that, I just want to say thank you to everyone for this moment, for us to move forward, move on, to be inspired. And Superintendent, I can't tell you how much your participation today means. Folks don't know this in the background, but he wasn't supposed to be here till about 10 minutes after 12. And he's sending me, he's blowing up my phone with text messages on how can I get in on this panel, because he wanted to be in on the conversation. And that's who he is. So thank you for being that kind of a superintendent. Tiffany, to the rest of the team, Paige, to CAMP, California After School Network, all the folks that were part of this design, I hope you have a wonderful sense of what you've accomplished today. So with that, I will close us and say, let's lead with love. Together we rise. Thank you, everyone.